Members of Congress and distinguished guests, my fellow Americans, we gather here today to right a grave wrong.
And with those words, an unprecedented moment in United States history. It was 1988. President Ronald Reagan apologized to an entire generation of Japanese Americans for unjustly locking them up during World War II. And he admitted it was because of their race and nothing more.
120,000 persons of Japanese ancestry were forcibly removed from their homes and placed in makeshift internment camps. This action was taken without trial, without jury. It was based solely on race.
Unfortunately, this country has a history of turning on vulnerable communities.
Lorraine Benai is the director of the Korematsu Center for Law and Equality.
When national security issues come up, the government has broad authority to act. And unfortunately, sometimes it acts as it did during World War II, out of concern to secure the nation.
From our very beginning, if you were different, you were a threat. In the early days of settling this country, indigenous peoples helped us survive. Then we labeled them as savages. We violated hundreds of treaties, taking their land and their lives. When slaves were freed, Jim Crow laws brought violence, voter suppression, and segregation, stifling African Americans from gaining power and influence. We needed the hard labor of Chinese immigrants to build the railroad, yet we called them foreign, vilifying them. In 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed. In each of these cases and many more, we fear what we are unfamiliar with.
This is an era of crisis.
Then politicians promise to get rid of them to keep you safe.
I think that when we see ignorance combined with fear, that's when we see these terrible things happen.
After Pearl Harbor, newspaper articles and political cartoons falsely characterized Japanese Americans as untrustworthy, dangerous, waiting for the signal to attack.
There's a tremendous cry to remove the Japanese Americans because of fear of espionage and sabotage.
We knew that some among them were potentially dangerous.
It did not have any proof that Japanese Americans had committed any acts of espionage or sabotage, and in fact, its own reports said that mass incarceration was not justified or necessary.
Despite that lack of proof, President Roosevelt ordered Japanese Americans to be locked up.
What we saw is an example of what happens when fear grips a country.
And it's still happening. Benai reminds me of 9/11 and how it stoked fear. Pearl Harbor all over again.
The country is looking at terrorism and branding the entire Muslim community as potential terrorists.
Suddenly, Muslims are being called untrustworthy, dangerous, waiting for the signal to attack. It's all too familiar.
Very strong parallels to what happened to Japanese Americans during World War II.
We must recognize that the internment of Japanese Americans was just that, a mistake.
Our ideals are just, but we must recognize that we have made many grave mistakes along the way. Instead of hiding them, we should learn from them and do it better next time.